This podcast is part of the Shareable Podcast Network. Learn more at shareable.fm. This is a Shareable mini episode where I ask the guest 10 important big questions, and they have to answer them as fast as they possibly can. I call it Think Fast. Welcome back to Shareable. Today on Think Fast, my guest, Rick Maurer, and I'm going to ask him 10 questions that he has to answer as quickly as he can. Rick, the rules of this are you have to get the answer out of your mouth as fast as possible, but you can answer the question slowly. You can take as much time as you want to elaborate on your answer, contextualize it, whatever you need. But the goal is that it's kind of like level one thinking. I want instinct, the first thing that comes to your mind in any of this. Are you ready for Think Fast?
I'm ready.
All right. First question. What book should everyone read? You can't say your own books because that's cheating.
Zen and the Art of Archery. The reason I said it had a huge impact on my life, and it's not a religious book, by the way. It's about a German guy went to Japan and wanted to learn Zen. And people said, well, you could learn the tea ceremony, which is a very elaborate kind of thing. And he said, or you could learn archery. And he said, ooh, archery, I like that. and what amazed him is that the focus wasn't on making the bullseye. It was about the whole process of how you stand there and you do it. And it's that being in the moment and being attentive to everything going on in the moment. And then not magically, you wouldn't say it this way, the arrow goes and you're on the target and you're near the bullseye. But it's had a profound impact on my life.
I love it. I remember in my early 20s, I started snowboarding, and a friend of mine told me about, I believe, a book called The Zen of Snowboarding. And I just remember how when I started to get really good at snowboarding, and it's still to this day, one of my favorite things to do is be on a mountain snowboarding, is that it's just a place where I lose all sense of time, all sense of everything except being in that moment and making the next turn and looking down the mountain a little bit ahead of me and making sure I understand the terrain and just being totally present. Even when I'm on the lift, I feel very centered and at peace, and the quiet, the wind rustling by my ear. It's just so like, anyway, okay, back to thinking fast.
Cool.
Okay. So what's your favorite podcast? And as much as you want to, you can't say Shareable.
God, my favorite podcast. You know, it's one that I haven't heard, but my wife listens to all the time. And so the quotes from it, and it's by Preet Bharara, who used to work at the United States Department of Justice. And I've heard I did hear a couple of podcasts with him. He knows a lot, but he's one of those hosts who just is interested in the other person and what they've been doing, you know, and I will give you a plug. It's sort of like you. I mean, but it's just, but you listened to him the couple times that I did hear him on drives with Kathy, and it's just, he's curious, and then his questions come out of his curiosity, and it's just, it's great.
That's what fuels my show, man. Okay. What negative experience in your life are you most happy that it happened to you?
Wow. I was getting out of college, and I was going to have to go to the military. There was a draft then. And I remember auditioning for an Army band that was located in the Midwest. And I just froze. I messed up completely. I mean, no one would have ever hired me. And I realized that while I was doing it, they were nice people. They were polite. And then a month after that, I auditioned for the United States Army Band in Washington, D.C., which is considered their main band. It's also a career band that if you're there, you could stay 30 years if you wanted. And even though I got nervous during that one, I was so much more prepared. And I had been through the audition process once already, so it wasn't as new. And so, yeah.
Got it. Freezing up on the first one. Got it. Okay. What is a lesson that you wished you learned earlier in life?
I wish I had learned to say no to projects much earlier. And I've been in business for just over 40 years. And about 15 years ago, I had a year where I had 3 really big consulting projects. You know, if you'd looked at these projects and wow, this is great. I ended up hating all 3 of them. One was, it's something I shouldn't have said yes to. It was work that didn't excite me anymore. And I said yes. And it was just my fault. and I didn't realize I was phoning it in. And it's still to this day, it's still an embarrassment that I just gave phoned in kind of service. The other two, the clients were acting in bad faith with each other, saying, oh yeah, well, this is what we wanted. And so I'm saying to my wife, Kathy, I said, God, maybe I'm not any good as a consultant anymore. I'd been doing it for 30 years at this point or something. And she said, well, maybe you were never any good. I don't think you've lost your skills in the last 6 months. Maybe you were never any good. And she knew that would make me laugh, by the way. Sometimes I'll tell people and they go, oh, you poor dear. But no. And so I got to talk and she said, look, you just took up music again and you love it. Why don't you just back off from work a little bit and play more music? And I didn't do that, but I was thinking about it. I was talking to a friend of mine and she said, well, why aren't you listening to your wife? And I said, well, I don't want to retire. The concept just doesn't appeal to me, but I want to know that there's some money there in case for some reason I changed my mind or I had to. And she said, well, how much more money do you need? And I said, I don't know. And she said, that'll keep you working. And so combining what my friend Kim said and what Kathy said, I thought, what if I only take work that gives me as much pleasure as music? That has changed everything. And I can tell most of the times on a phone call if this is going to be a good fit, if it's the kind of thing that I should say yes to. And I don't think I would have listened to that advice as a young man and was hungry. But had I done that, I think I would have not taken on projects like facilitating meetings for people that had nothing to do with the project I was working on, just as a facilitator. I hated doing that. I can do it okay, but nobody's ever going to say, oh, you ought to hire Rick to do that. But the stuff that I do really well, people go, oh, you ought to call Rick. And had I learned that earlier, it would have been, I wish I'd learned it earlier. So
awesome, man. What do you think is the most important skill of the future?
The ability to stay present. I think,
wow.
I
don't know if I've heard that answer before on this, but that's a good one.
If I thought more about it, maybe something else, but I don't know. I mean,
you're not supposed to think more about it. It's fast.
Okay.
Think fast. And your think fast answer was a really good one. All right. Okay. What industry or career path has the most promising future or potential?
I don't know, other than something, if you're like in college or something that gives you lots of flexibility. So that because the world changes so quickly, to get it locked into, hey, I'm going to be this kind of engineer, I'm going to be that, I think is just could be self-defeating.
Do you think there's a particular discipline that if you're keeping yourself open and flexible, so for instance, some people might say like communications or coaching. Some people would say computer programming or data science or analytics or something. Is there marketing, sales? Like all of those are things that you could look at it from a certain perspective and say, you could be pretty flexible with that. And then there's other things you think, oh, the robots are coming. So is there any particular angle that you would take on that flexibility?
Yeah, I do think that a liberal arts education is a good thing. And I think we lose that because we want to be so technologically competent. We've got to, that we're demanding a lot of ourselves. And I understand that when I go to a doctor, I want that doctor to know what he or she is doing. But I think those that have a broader foundation can also see different things and are more open to different possibilities. And I don't mean that you have to have a degree in 19th century, English literature or anything, but it's that curiosity about things that are outside your profession. My profession is organization development. And sometimes I hate getting around with fellow professionals because that's all they know to talk about. Mm-hmm. And it bores me to tears. Yeah. And then I have others that's their profession, but they're interested in other things. And consequently, their work shows it.
Yeah.
So
I dig it. Okay. What's one thing that everybody listening to this episode should go and do today? It's something they have to be able to at least start today, if not complete.
I would say, and this actually comes from my Seizing Moments of Possibility, is start observing other people working with each other just out of curiosity to go, that's interesting. Boy, Jeff is talking himself into a hole right there. That's interesting. Wow, look at that. People are paying attention. They're giving him money now. And that ability to, before we act, just observe. It also really helps us be in the present, to go back to one of the earlier questions.
Love it. Love it. Okay. If you could have any one superpower, Rick, what would it be?
Oh, one superpower. To help myself and others to be open to differences. And differences where where we are terribly polarized. I would love it if I had the capacity to actually talk with somebody who thought their thinking was 180 degrees from mine, and we could actually communicate with civility and openness and respect for the other. If I had that for myself, that would be a hell of a superpower. But if I could help others with that, that would be great.
Great. So. Okay, so here's the fun part of that question. What would you be willing to sacrifice to have that superpower?
I'd be willing to sacrifice the paid work that I do.
Okay.
If it got in the way of that, I'd be willing to say, no, I'm not going to do that. I can cut back here. I can cut back there. Okay. That's a great question.
So that question actually used to be different, but I had a guest on, it might've been the previous guest from this or 2 episodes ago. Anyway, I asked him a question, and he actually asked me, he said, I thought you were going to ask that or something. So he brought that up, and I was like, oh my God, that's such a good follow-up question to that.
Yeah.
Cause I'm obsessed with superheroes and superheroism and superpowers and all that stuff. And that's such a good thing to say, like, well, you can have this amazing thing, but what would you give up for it? Right. Cause it really forces you into that thinking of how bad do you actually want that? And what would you give up? Like, what's the most you would give up for that? So
yeah, I like that.
The final question is going to probably take you a little bit to
okay.
It might take, this is the big one. Okay. Have you seen any of the Marvel movies? Have you seen them all? Any of them?
I don't think I have. If I have, it hasn't been a recent one. So.
Okay, cool. So I'm going to explain the premise to you.
Okay.
Of the question, because you can't really answer the question without the premise. The premise is this: in the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the comics, there's something known as the Infinity Gauntlet. It is a glove. And in that glove, it holds 6 infinity stones. They're known as the Infinity Gems. And if you have the gauntlet and all of the stones in it, you have the capacity to snap your fingers and anything across time and space and reality that you can ever imagine in your mind could happen. Thanos in the Marvel Cinematic Universe snaps his fingers to eliminate half of life in the entire universe. And then Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man snaps his fingers to bring everybody back. Or actually the Hulk snaps to bring everybody, but Robert Downey Jr. snaps his fingers to eliminate the threat of Thanos and his armies. But it costs him his life, because when normal humans snap their fingers with the Infinity Gauntlet, the power is simply too much and they can't sustain the rest of their life. But anything that you want could happen. So question is, I have this Infinity Gauntlet. It has all 6 Infinity Stones in it, and I can hand it to you, and you could put it on your hand and you could snap your fingers, and anything that you could possibly think of, any change to this world, good, bad, indifferent, can happen, but it will cost you your life. The question is, do you put it on? And if you do, what happens after you snap?
The word greed comes to mind. I would have to be real clear about how I was. I see a lot of the world's problems through the ages kind of having to do with a power that corrupts, not just power like to get things done, and that I would eliminate that, and I'd be willing to give up my life to eliminate that.
Awesome. Yeah. All right. Well, I've been Jeff Gibbard. This has been Rick Maurer, and this has been Think Fast. And this episode and this podcast has been shareable. Wait, don't leave. If you've never listened to my fancy outro, do it just once for me, please. Okay, if you enjoy shareable and you find it valuable, there's a few ways that you can support the show. 1, you can share it on social media, which I strongly encourage. I mean, it's literally the name of the show, shareable. 2, you can review it on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're an Overcast user, as many of my listeners are, make sure to click that star button on the episodes that you like. The third way that you can support the show is by blogging about it or discussing it on your own podcast, or even by making a YouTube video where you talk about one of the episodes. And then the final way that you can support the show is by supporting it directly on Patreon. You can find the link in the show notes. Now, before I let you go, I want to tell you about one other thing. You see, Shareable is just one of many projects that I'm working on at any given time. I've got another podcast called Rogue. I do a live streaming show every week called The Heroic Council. I've got a blog where I release a blog post twice a week. And if you're looking to keep up with all sorts of different content that can help you grow and become a superhero in life, I want you to check out jeffgibbard.me. That's where I list all of my current projects and projects that are coming up in the future, including my forthcoming book, The Lovable Leader. It would mean a lot to me if you could go and check out some of the other things I've worked on, because I put just as much of my heart into those projects as I do into Shareable. Thank you so much for being a listener. Thank you for being a supporter, and I hope to see you here on the next episode of Shareable.